you want. Go on, you could be the head of the table.
Oh no, thanks.
I know, squeezed right out. He was lounging before.
Chilled out.
Sorry.
What are you sorry about? You're very welcome.
Just don't stand on his foot.
Yeah, Dan.
Make an over a curve.
Not quite as good as the gavel, is it, right? If we can make a start. Welcome everyone to the membership, to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee services. At the beginning of the last meeting, I spent 4 minutes introducing everybody and there was no sound. So there was 4 minutes of this. I hope perhaps this time, if you would just introduce yourself when you're talking, it may just help us to get to know everyone that's around. So on to the agenda then. Apologies for absence, please, Kim.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Graham.
And no substitute.
No substitutes.
Thank you very much. The minutes of the meeting of the held on the 26th. Is everyone quite content to read those minutes?
Agree.
Thank you. Declarations of interest.
None received, Chair.
Anybody have any declaration they wish to make now? Any questions from the members of the public
None received, Chair.
or from members?
No.
Which brings us then to item 6, the committee forward work programme, pages 7 to 20. I see Councillor Follows is registered to speak. Would you like to have 4 minutes now?
I would. I certainly don't need 4 minutes. It is just a request that for some of the items on the agenda that have been through ONS in the last few rounds of this, we haven't had any particular recommendations. I think we've had one since the election, and it's now peaking at December. And also just to comment on the rest of the work programme, I don't see, for example, anything on the climate change action plan or many things at all in the environmental or environmental health space. And it was effectively just a request that you do look at that. So that there is additional scrutiny on some of those items that the exec obviously consider very seriously, but we would like an outside eye to have a comment on.
To be fair, Councillor Follows, I think the reason that the work programme itself is rather, the forward work programme is rather light is because we've only just got Jake in post. So therefore, the items that are on here at the moment are the things that sort of were there when Mark left, but we haven't.
So the exec forward programme is now
The exec
significant. So
Yes.
my
Yes.
hope is that it will be equally significant at ONS.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, then, if I could just make a comment. I did have a query, as Kim knows, over the minutes of the last ONS, but because of such a rushed nature of the business, there's no point in raising it. But it does actually relate to the item I'd like to mention first of all, which is the Economic Development Strategy review. We hope to have that at this meeting so that we could actually comment and send some recommendations. And it was withdrawn very late, as you can see, after the agenda was drawn up. My worry about this, and somebody could perhaps reassure me, is that it says on the Executive Forward programme that this is designed to go to the Executive on the 9th of January and then to the Council on the 20th of February. And it doesn't take a genius to work out that gives us no time at a scheduled meeting to review that strategy at all. So I just want to make a general point that if we are going to review anything, we need the documents in advance so that we can actually review them, put your recommendations, and then, you know, hopefully make a difference. So I would like to see the Economic Development Strategy review back on the work programme. But if it's going to be another one of these where we just look at it before it's nodded through at Exec and Council, it's a waste of everyone's time. So whether, if the final dates change, then obviously it's worth coming back to us. The other item which Councillor Munro raised, and we spoke about this with Chris Wheeler, was the Surrey Environment Partnership. Do you want to say something about it, David?
Yes, it just reading some of the previous reports, it occurred to me that this is a very worthy subject for scrutiny, and I don't think it's received much scrutiny in the in the preceding months and years. I'm not suggesting there's anything fundamentally wrong, but there are some statistics there which show, for instance, waste reduction targets could be more stringent and actually followed. And this is a residence. It's not a council thing. It's up, but we have a leading role, of course, in persuading residents not to be so obsessed with recycling, which is only number 3 in the hierarchy, and more concerned with waste reduction to stop it occurring in the first place. So all in all, a worthy subject.
Yeah, and Chris Wheeler was very, very helpful. He divided it up into 2. Have you got that email? So he was suggesting that the first item would be, as Councillor Munro has just said, the talking about communications and waste reduction activity, probably asking for an introduction from somebody from SEP in April or May, and it will be on the emphasis very much that the Waverley's action plans, how they are being adapted to join in. SEP, sorry, is the Surrey Environment Partnership. Sorry, I just see the look on your face. I've done it again.
I was thinking mushroom, actually.
Yes, very nice. But so it's the Surrey Environment Partnership, and as Councillor Munro said, it's to do with a better way of dealing with waste. That's what it's all about. And it fits in very much with the priorities of this executive and authority. So I'd like to add that one. Councillor Townsend, Philip Townsend, at the beginning was saying he really didn't know the sorts of things that we can add. We've had climate change. That was on every single agenda, I seem to recall, some form of scrutiny, and it's dropped off completely. But if there is something we should be scrutinising at the moment, then obviously we'll put that back on. Does anybody else have anything they want to say? I mean, it is our agenda, and it's entirely up to you to say if there's something. We have done task and finish groups, and we've also, had these subjects that people have found interesting. So I was saying perhaps to Councillor Townsend, perhaps looking over old agendas might just give you some idea of the sort of topics. Kim, maybe going to do the same thing, no?
Sorry.
I thought you were just going to come up with some topics.
No, I
we
was
have neglected.
seeing if anybody, but nobody's got their camera on, so.
Oh, no.
Question there. Is there somewhere easily that we can see a list of the task and finish groups that have happened in the past for those of us who are new?
Yeah, I mean, remember that it won't be absolutely parallel because there were 4 scrutiny,
Yes.
and so we've honed it down to 2. But yes, the best thing always is old agendas, and because then you'll see the subjects that we've already looked at and where we've got to. The most recent task and finish group was obviously the Cranley Leisure Centre, where you've got a set topic and a time, and of course the feedback to this group from that was superb. They came back every time.
So where that question was going was that I was involved as a resident before I was a councillor in meetings in Elstead about fire preparedness after the fires on the Common, and I wondered whether very much had happened about that within Waverley, and if not, I know that that's something that Elstead residents are certainly very concerned about.
It was certainly raised because Jenny Else raised it on more than one occasion. I'd have to come back to you on that. We'll have to have a thing, but yes, I mean, that's the sort of topic it resident, because this is very much us representing the residents' views in here, and if there is something that they want, but we certainly have discussed.
We did although we didn't have a task and finish group, we did have a discussion on emergency response and our role in it.
One of the other ones that reminded, thinking of Jenny, was when going back some time now, but when Meals on Wheels, remember, was the funding was threatened, and we did a group of us looked into that and worked out, the best way forward with that. So, they're quite meaty sort of task and finish groups if the subject lends itself to that sort of thing. So
I can pull a list up of the task and finish groups we had. That would be great. Just to circulate.
That would be great.
yeah.
Chairman, sorry,
Go on.
I mean, given the situation that there's just been in Godalming and the villages with the water situation, I mean, maybe that's something that we should be looking at as well. Yeah.
Excuse me, this is my meeting.
Sorry.
We had a meeting this morning with Tom Hallwood and the other directors, we were talking about that, and as Tom pointed out, that there are several people wanting to do public meetings on it, and of course the limited response that actually Waverley can do. I mean, it's not the responsible body, and what it did was remarkable, and everyone's incredibly grateful to every officer concerned. But I'm not sure that anything other than a public meeting is going to add anything here. But obviously, if anybody feels that we need to look at that, I mean, resilience is not, it's not really our responsibility, but helping out is, as we did very well. Anything else on our work? Oh, sorry, Councillor Rubin.
I think that.
Oh, sorry.
Go on.
Sorry,
go on.
Councillor Monroe, you were next.
Miles in
You were
front.
next, sorry.
No problem. Thank you. I'm very pleased to see that the scrutiny of the Safer Waverley Partnership is on the list for 2024. It's one of the main issues which concern people in my part of the world, and I'm sure I'm not unique in that. Could I just ask for, when it becomes a really serious item, and we get the police there, because the messages that I'm getting from is that Waverley is doing the best it can with very limited legislative powers, and it's really up to the police. I'm not saying the partnership doesn't work, I think it does, but I think we should give it a bit of a prod to make it work even better. So early and thoroughly.
Yes, no, I agree with you totally. And it was one of those things that we suddenly realised, again, like talking about SEP and all these other things, that if you've been here, a long time, you know exactly what it does and but for any new councillor, they have no idea of its effectiveness and what it does. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Monroe, we'll take that on board and make sure that it's in depth and as you say, productive. Councillor Rubin?
Yes, thank you, Chair. When I was on the committee like this 4 or 5 years ago, we looked at task and finishing on new house builds, particularly with the green climate and the type of equipment.
Can I just stop you just for a moment? Remember, that was the other system of,
Yes.
And housing is under resources.
Ah,
so, yes,
it's under resources.
yes, I'm afraid so. So, and in fact, some of the task and finish groups we did will also have come under housing. So, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to
Sorry?
silence you, but I thought you were going down the wrong route. So,
You're probably right.
so yeah, housing no longer with us. So if everyone's content, then we'll ask Kim to advise us of some of the stuff we've perhaps done in the past. And anytime you can just whack in an idea for something that you think would be good for this committee to have a look at. We're getting into budget time, of course, which is when everyone focuses on money, and that's something we don't focus on here. So it is a bit of the next couple of months. It's very much money focused, but I'm sure that we can find plenty to look at. Can we move on then to item 7, the corporate performance report? Ours is on where we always get exciting changes. It's on page 35 of the report, or page 63 of your whole pack. So we start at number 10, really, regeneration and planning policy. So that's what we're looking at. So, Jenny, are you going to introduce this first before we take any speakers?
Nothing particularly to highlight really, just a couple of the heads of service are here to answer any queries. Any other queries, I'm happy to take away and ask the relevant head of service to provide a written answer.
That's lovely. Thank you. No, that's absolutely fine. Right, so we do have people who put their name down to speak on this. Councillor Follows, do you wish to speak on this?
Yes, thank you, members. I think broadly the elements under your remit are fairly clear, and the targets and objectives of them are pretty much all green, with the exception of environmental services regarding bin collection. And there was just a few bits on here I wanted to flag. There has been a debate with the exec head and the exec in regards to what type of objective we have in regards to street cleaning. And in terms of whether A should be an objective and B what that objective should be if we have one. My personal opinion is that we should have an objective regarding street cleaning, particularly for the principal towns and Cranley. And certainly one of my requests to you is that as part of your work, you might perhaps consider what an appropriate objective around street cleaning might actually be. Certainly we think we should have one, but it's not quite clear as to the level that we should be looking at on that. In terms of some of the missed bin collections, I mean, I'm sure all of you will have had anecdotal evidence of issues in your own wards where one or two were missed here and there. Certainly the head of service would like me to flag that the missed bins equate to 0.006% of all waste collections, which is a fair point. However, that is absolutely no good to the residents in question that have been missed. And I think it's probably pretty clear to say, and I can say from my experience in my own ward as well, that in some cases those are repeated misses for various different reasons. One of the things I learned, I think, more than anything else after becoming a councillor is that the knowledge, and particularly local knowledge of individual crews, is fundamental to all bins actually being collected. And when you have a churn of crews, you tend to have missed areas. When you have lots of illnesses or temporary crews, or God forbid, the management teams themselves being pressed into service on the actual lorries, does tend to cause some of these issues. We have had a slightly higher than above average swap out and churn of crews. Lots of different reasons for that. Some of it has been COVID. There's still a requirement if you're positive that you really should be trying to stay home. That's to infect the rest of those crews. We have had a few localized illnesses, and I believe even one heart attack amongst one of the particular crews that we have. It led to some gaps in local knowledge. As you can see, the numbers are slightly improving, but they're still not within the target of 40. This is something that we picked up specifically with Chris Weaver about how we try and deal with that going forward. But those are the sorts of reasons that come along with those targets. So if you do have residents with repeat missed bins, it will usually mean that something is either wrong with the map or something has happened with the local crews. So my request would be that you flag any of those, particularly repeat instances, as quickly as possible. Now in the summer particularly, that was particularly unpleasant, where if you had multiple missed bins collected and it was 3-4 weeks of hot summer, that was obviously something that we were dealing with as quickly as we possibly can. Not so pressing in the winter, but if you do get those gaps, please do flag them. I imagine Councillor Townsend, who's also registered to speak, will wish to comment further on planning.
I would rather go through this systematically so that we don't miss anything out. So if we could go, and when we come to the bins bit, George, if you could wait and say something then. Councillor Hollis has said more or less what Richard Homewood said at our last meeting, if you remember, when we queried bins. So I'd rather go back to page 35 and pick up any items from the committee as we go through. So the first one is regeneration and planning policy. We have a report, which I take it you have all read. Abby's not with us, is she, to talk about it? So does anybody have any comments on those pages, please? Number 10. Everyone quite content to leave that? Don't seem to be any big issues. I mean, we've got big things happening, but in terms of performance, we don't seem to have any issues. On to then commercial services. We haven't got Kelvin. Have we got anybody else remotely from commercial services? No. Can't see. Is that Claire? It's hiding behind Jane. All right. So once again, can we just have a quick look at the indicators? Is there anything that we want to flag up to Kelvin via Jenny?
No, the only thing to say about the KPIs for commercial services is the target for the number of visitors has been temporarily removed because there's been a change in the contract, and the the new, is it Everyone Active?
Everyone Active.
Yeah, they record numbers in a very different way. So the target was not comparable. That will be reinstated during Q3.
You explained that to us last time, didn't you? That's
Yes.
right, I remember now, trying to work out how you didn't count people, and then Kim told us she sneaks in without flashing a card at times, so it's not counted. So, you
But
know,
I do think it's got to do with how they count groups and parties.
anything else apart from that? Yes, councillor Murray?
I don't know whether I can say about parking, that
Yes, it comes under this.
I'm fed up, and so are a lot of residents, I know, that our standard parking charge is £1.10 an hour. It's not, well, it is in Farnham.
Can we start having these debates, please, just like councillor Murray talked?
In several of the car parks there, and lots of residents, and I join with them and say, can we just not make it an hour, £1 for an hour, and redistribute the requirements to get revenue elsewhere. It just sounds so petty. I suppose there is an argument to say, well, if residents don't have the change, they'll have to put in £1.50 or £1.20, and therefore there's more revenue for the council. I can understand that. We do need revenue from parking. It's one of our main revenue generators, but can you please review next time round?
I'm sure Jenny can take
I
the
will
message
pass that
back.
on to Calvin and ask him to respond to you. If that's okay.
Well, respond to residents by changing it.
Clear, councillor Murray.
Thank you.
Right, councillor Long.
Well, I was just thinking on that point, having noted in the agenda, in the report rather, that there's been a dip in revenue from, so if we were to not, my maths is dreadful. It's a little bit under 10%, isn't it? Off, that would be. Yeah. And actually, I had a bit of a wonder about that reading the report as well, was what impact the water outage had on car parking revenue, presumably.
It's straying now a little bit from.
Sorry.
From what we do. I think it's a valid point, and we want to get parking usage up. I mean, that just benefits all of us. And we do know that they're recruiting, and we are going to have some action on parking so that we can improve the take up. That's what it says in the report, and taking it as read. So, councillor Busby, you want to?
Thank you. Yeah, but absolutely, we do want to get car park usage up, but I guess it's do we have an idea as to whether the fact that progress in terms of going back to pre-COVID levels is stalled, whether that is less people basically going to town centres, or is it because people are using public transport options more active travel? So we do want to increase usage of the car park, certainly, but not if that is, I guess, people that are now cycling or walking to the town centre.
At some point, I'm sure somebody will do some analysis and end up with some figures, but at the moment, I don't honestly think we know. This was a great time. I think it was a bit of a tie, right?
Well, it was, we do need to increase revenue, but it's a real contradiction when you think we're trying to actually keep cars off the roads and, you know, take more public transport. So I think this revenue from parking is going to go down, even if we increase the hourly rate, which we hope to do, right? But if we were to, it will still go down as we all start to presumably take more public transport. So there's potentially going to be a revenue gap.
Well, we should charge bicycles, shouldn't we? Parking,
And walking.
charge cars.
Especially the electric ones.
Who was next? Was it councillor Rubini, or did you indicate councillor Keane?
I did.
Right.
Under.
It was 3 in a row, you know, so.
Sorry.
Right, councillor Rubini, you can go
Sorry,
first.
it's not fine. What I was going to say on car parks was that Hazelmere itself, on a Friday and Saturday, sometimes on a Thursday, you can't park there anyway. The car parks are actually full. So I'm assuming that we've gone back to pre-COVID days when we were getting the income. The other thing I would answer about bicycles, I do have a problem in the town centre where we have a large bicycle actually put in and takes 2 car parking spaces, yet I've never ever seen more than 2 bicycles. I don't know how to sell it, and I don't know whether in fact it's something we need to look at, try and sell to the cycling community, but they don't seem to want to use it because they want to see their bicycles. And being placed in the car park, they cannot see it.
Councillor Keane?
Yes, I was really just going to say that, you know, all the car parks, wherever you go, I mean, you go to Guildford, I go to Petersfield quite often, they've all gone up in price. I mean, Petersfield used to be known as one of the cheapest, and it is now on a par. So, you know, they're all trying, obviously, to make sort of financial gain from their car parking. And that one, again, that's always full. It's a real struggle to park. So, you know, it's very difficult.
It certainly is. Councillor Austin, do you want to make this the last comment on parking?
Yeah, I'm a part of this future analysis of parking patterns. I'd be very interested to know how people are paying, how that has been changed now, what proportion of people are actually paying cash now. And it's probably a generation thing, but everyone I know pays electronically.
Yeah, it's totally a generation thing, and I'm going to stand up for the oldies here and say, you know, why should we have an app? You know, but basically, you know, I think it would be very, very interesting to look at that, and as you say, I'm sure somewhere down the line the research is being done and we'll hear about it. But I think you've got the message.
I will
Thank
pass
you.
it on
Pass
to
it on
Kelvin
Kelvin.
and ask him to respond to your.
If we could move on then to the community services, we do have. Hi.
Yes, hello.
So do you wish to say anything to your report before we?
No, I think it's all pretty straightforward and laid out, but happy to answer any questions or concerns.
It's all looking so good, it's difficult to know what question we could possibly ask you, isn't it? Have we got anyone down to, anyone?
Chair, could I ask you just to introduce yourself, because there are a number of new people around this table who don't know who you are, including me.
Oh, absolutely. My name's Sam Hutchison. I'm the Executive Head for Communities for both Waverley and Guildford Councils.
Now, I noticed Councillor Hyman's just appeared on the screen. Can you hear me, Councillor Hyman?
I can, thank you.
Right, we're just looking at the moment at the community, number 12, the community challenges.
Yes, I have been listening, and I understand you're taking them one at a time. No, I had actually wanted to speak on number 11, but you moved on rather. Sorry, number 10. Sorry, LPP2 and hearings. We'll leave that till tomorrow night. I think the planning policy probably best rather than discuss it now. Under commercial services there, at page 40, which is page 68 of the agenda papers, it mentions just items which are of interest to residents of Farnham in particular, and major development at Brightwells, in respect to the car park being handed over, and also mentions the bridge. I just wondered whether there was anybody there who could give us an update on whether the car park has been built to a standard that it'll take electric cars without falling down, and whether the handover is going ahead regardless or whatever. And as far as the bridge is concerned, whether there's any update on that. And as far as I would like to speak just briefly on air quality, and as we move on to the other items as well. Thanks very much, Chairman.
Right. I apologise for not calling you soon. I didn't realise you were there till you suddenly appeared on the screen. So, right, something else for you, Jenny, to take back. The size of the car park, whether or not we would be able to. Well, do you know anything about it, Sam?
No, I don't.
No,
not that I've been.
You?
Would you like me to add something, Madam Chair?
No, not at the moment.
In which case I won't. Thank you. I can, but I won't.
So,
Excuse me, Chair.
so it looks as though we'll have to ask for both updates for Jenny to, and could you make sure it comes out to all of us when we have these updates, so that we are all kept up to date.
Madam Chair,
Yeah,
can I just get some clarification here? If a member of this committee has got a contribution to make as.
I'm not a member of the committee.
you're not a member of the
You're not a
committee.
member, you're
But the executive, you did.
I beg your pardon, okay.
I can answer your question, but I'm not being.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah,
Beg
any
your
member
pardon.
of the committee can speak as
You're
many
not a member
times
of
as
the
they want.
No, I can answer your question, but I can't answer your question.
Later, maybe.
Indeed.
Thank you.
So moving on then, so nothing else for Sam? Got off very lightly there, Sam. Well done.
Yes, I have.
Oh, sorry, John.
That's all right.
Councillor Crowe.
The rise in safeguarding cases, do we know what, why that might be? I mean, I'm sure there's a combination of reasons.
Yes, there are a combination of reasons. I think the best way to answer that, councillor, is our communities are facing the hardest time that they have in many ways for quite a few generations. So the backdrop of the cost of living crisis is huge. But very pertinent to that as well is the escalated pressure that communities are feeling around mental health, general health and well-being, and the pressures that Surrey County Council are under, which means that their threshold of need by which when they will intervene is much higher. And that therefore leaves us with the people who are not presenting with the adult social care needs that are required by the Surrey County Council threshold. The risk sits with us. And that is not something we can avoid. We could debate that it's not right and it isn't right, you know, but it is what it is. And it's increasingly troubling, actually, to be frank, and particularly amongst our young people, where we're seeing a huge amount of mental health crisis, a rise in self-harm that is sort of coming into hospital admissions, and not necessarily the amount of support around that that's necessary. But in a nutshell, it's that perfect storm in a teacup that is brought to us here. And we do deal with some of the most vulnerable people in our housing stock and through our community work. So no problem.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I totally understand. So this bit here, that we're seeing a rise in community triggers among our students. What does that mean?
So a community trigger is part of the antisocial behaviour collaboration, if you like, of approach that's through the Safer Waverley Partnership. And what happens is that if there is experience held by somebody of 3 or more situations where their issue has not been dealt with, for want of a better word, we create a community trigger and look at how the partnership, which often involves housing. My colleague David, who is on the screen, has recently joined us and is going to be leading on that area of work as well, of how we put in place resolutions around antisocial behaviour that can minimise the risks to our community. And in addition to that, if I could just clarify, Chair, that from the safeguarding point of view, through what we've noticed and what we're seeing, we have presented and the need to have a growth bid for a safeguarding specific officer to help coordinate this on a corporate level that has met wide support. So again, that will help us make sure our governance is tip-top around that.
We just see while David's on the screen. David,
Yes.
is there anything you'd like to add?
No, not at all. I think Sam's given you a really good picture there. The work around safeguarding and antisocial behaviour and a whole range of other community issues has grown and grown and grown, and the legislation that comes in to help us actually manage that makes sure that we're much more accountable and much more transparent as we go along. So things like community triggers, which are now called antisocial behaviour case reviews, are a way of making sure that we're dealing with these issues before they get out of hand and cause bigger problems.
Thank you. Councillor Munro?
Yeah, thank you. It's very dear to my heart, community triggers. I mean, what sets community triggers apart from other interventions is that it is the statutory right someone, provided there's the right threshold to be reached, 3 or more incidents over 6 months, that sort of thing. It's a statutory right, actually, to have action. And this council and partners will be breaking the law if they don't do it. So it's a very powerful weapon. But I'm told it is very underused, unfortunately. People do not go to seek community triggers. I can't think why, but they don't. So I hope perhaps that's something for a future agenda item. It's not meeting the expectations of the people who set this valuable tool up, unfortunately. I'm sure it is in individual cases, but there should be more of them, come what may, and we need to do something about it, because there are vulnerable people out there who just don't realise of the huge weapon they have at their disposal, and they're not using it.
Good point, Councillor Mahmood. I'm sure Kim has made a note. Councillor Dean?
Yes, I mean, with antisocial behaviour, I think, you know, it's certainly since COVID, I think certainly among the young people, you know, antisocial behaviour has gone up, and you know, maybe it's something that, you know, we should be looking at in the work programme.
It's interesting you should say that, because obviously we've got the next item coming up, and we can sort of raise, you know, how far we can take what we're going to do. And what the Safer Waverley Partnership was sort of added as a result of the conversation with Katie Webb, if you remember, about, you know, the future of I suppose in Waverley. So, you know, there's a whole network here of things that we've got to get right and we've got to understand fully. So I think certainly we can look into how we can best help you by whatever we say in this.
Absolutely. And I think, Chair, you're absolutely right that all links into the Safer Waverley Partnership work and the ASB reviews, as David says, stroke community triggers, and the knowledge amongst the public, particularly the most vulnerable, about those measures, because the measures, what often is used is not by the most vulnerable, it's by people who know what's out there and what's going on. So I think there is a significant piece of work around how we can make our Safer Waverley Partnership much more approachable, if that makes sense, and tangible to the public.
Right, Councillor Keane again.
Sorry, just to come back, you're right that, you know, vulnerable people, they don't like to say anything because they don't want to make anything worse. It may be, and they probably don't understand what they can do, but it may be that something could go in homes and and even a little piece to say, this is your right, you can do this, and have a contact name. That might help the vulnerable.
And it might be helpful, Chair, for councillors for us to circulate what's actually on the website if you haven't managed to see that, because there is some very good stuff there about it. But again, like you say, it's that question of accessibility and knowledge to look about it and find it.
Literacy, I suppose.
In some cases, absolutely,
Councillor, yes, Councillor Head, sorry, I'll come back to Councillor Review. Sorry, it's just all the hands go up at one time. Right, yes, Councillor Head.
Well, I'm intrigued really, because I had a case referred to me by a fellow councillor just today about a single mother in Farnham who's got bad mould in her flat. She's a housing tenant, Waverley housing tenant, and she reported to my colleague that when she was speaking to housing, or the reception took the call, they hung up on her. And I shall be looking into it later in the week. So maybe people are intimidated, and maybe it's not getting reported through because there's a problem at the call centre. I will look into it.
Yeah, I think that's something you should look into.
I will look into it, but it was referred to me because it's now housing that falls inside my ward that wasn't previously. So
no, I mean, it's something you should definitely change.
Maybe people are intimidated and they don't report.
We've got to find a way of reaching all of them. I think that's really what Sam's saying. Councillor Rabini?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What I'm going to say was that due to was the VCC committee to meet, I think, the end of this week, and there are questions on there about joined up thinking between all different partnerships, including ours, and other associated ASB agencies. So I'd hope there's going to be some progression made on that. We spoke to the Chief Constable last week, and he too is very keen on trying to get more work done on the ASB agenda. My own problem in Havesmere, for example, is that we haven't seen a police officer. We've had nobody come to the town council, and my clerk is still trying to make an arrangement. We are now told that the senior police officer for this area can't possibly see us until January anyway. So we're finding it very difficult to find out what is happening locally. So we still don't have this communication between the police and locals. And I'm told they're giving back the area they use.
I think this comes right back to what Councillor Moreau was saying about getting the Safer Waverley Partnership, you know, really being effective and being looked at and seeing where we, you know, can help in whatever way as a committee. So I think, you know, I think we've all agreed that we've got to, you know, get that whole package, and so that we don't let anyone down. I'd like to sort of move on slightly, but to Councillor Crane.
I'll be very quick. So quite a few years ago, I actually did my master's dissertation on the community safety reduction partnerships in Surrey. And the dissertation wasn't entirely complimentary about many of the agencies, mainly because they basically did not use the legislation and the powers that they had at their disposal for many, many reasons, one of which was, well, again, a combination of many things, ineptitude, can't be bothered stuff, you know, I mean, you know, pretty inexcusable reasons. So I'm, you know, really interested in what, you know, seeing the Safer Waverley stuff now and seeing how things have hopefully progressed.
Yeah, I think, Chair, to answer that, you're absolutely right. I think the move that we're trying to make and is being made is to have a person victim-centred approach and using the correct legislation and support around that, rather than it being about always being about the perpetrator and the proof against the perpetrator. It's now about supporting the victim and raising the victim's voice. So yeah.
Right. I'd like to move on, Councillor.
I hadn't quite finished.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All I was going to say was on December the 4th in Farnham, there is a meeting being held by the PCC where anybody can go along and raise on behalf of the community their problems. So I would suggest that you go. They're going right around the county. And I just wanted to plug that as an opportunity.
Yeah, I hope more turn up than last time. I think there were 3 of us there last time.
Exactly.
Can we move on then to the final one, which is where we started really, going on to whatever it's called, Head of Environmental Services. We haven't got the report. We've heard why the red is red on page 48 of the document, 76 of the whole pack. Does anybody wish to make any further comment on it?
I've got a number of comments. Can I do it in order?
Yeah.
First of all, to start off about the work of the Countryside Rangers, and just to congratulate them, frankly. Certainly in my part of the world, they're very busy. They have an excellent year, partly helped by the weather, which hasn't been as brilliant as it was previous summer, but to be fair, it's also because of the really good work they've done, and they've had no serious trouble at all, French and ponds and all the surrounding, and that's not by accident. So I wanted to say that. I'm sorry to see about filming. I'm a great fan of filming in this area, and so are a lot of residents. They like to see the films coming, and they like watching it and all the rest of it. It's not unmixed blessing. Too much traffic sometimes, going down inappropriate roads, but all in all, filming is a good thing, I believe. I'm sorry, obviously, during the American writers' strike, I can quite understand why it's filming has been down, but I hope we can make a real push. I think we've got a system all set up to encourage people to come along, and I hope it's used to its fullest extent. That's great. The last one I had on bins.
Yeah.
You know, it's an astonishingly rigorous target. This 40 bins out of 100,000. Well, I mean, we're just setting ourselves up to fail. Frankly, that target, if target's going to mean anything, they mustn't be slack, but they must not be unrealistically rigid. Could we look at that? And again, it's certainly my part of the world. I do get complaints. I'm sure we all do, but there have been 100% rate with me of actually sorting the complaints out. So we're not perfect, of course we're not, but I don't think we're not a sea of red in any way at all.
I must say I disagree slightly on that in terms of lowering the target. I agree with you that the service is very good, but if you're the one, you know, it doesn't matter who you are, it is a disaster. And if it's 3 sort of food bins 3 weeks in a row, despite the fact that, you know, they've been contacted, you know, it's a disaster. So it's getting that balance. And if we don't aim for 100%, we're basically saying some poor soul's not going to have a bin emptied. And, you know, I just don't feel that as targets we can do that. We have to go for 100%, but we have to be realistic when things do go slightly wrong. Councillor Head?
I'm not very good at statistics, but all I'd say is that all the way through COVID, right up to the present moment, me personally, I'd say that BIFA have done a fantastic job on bin collection. And when you phone in to say that they've missed, probably due to staff sickness, they come out and deal with it. But I'd like to pick up on what Councillor Follows was touching on earlier, which is street cleaning. There has been no street cleaning in Farnham for weeks. That's weeks. There's no bin man or barrow man. There's an accumulation of leaves and litter and detritus and dog ends. And you probably all know that I couldn't get a glutton machine for Farnham because the executive rejected it last administration. But therefore, we need to have effective barrow men and we need a hit squad. And it was brought up at Farnham Town Council a few weeks ago, and a resolution was put, a recommendation was put to council to write to Waverley Borough Council to see whether it was a possibility to split off from the contract the cleaning operation so that Farnham could take it over direct with our direct labour force. And it was a unanimous vote, and a letter has been sent in, or communications come in to Waverley to see whether that's a possibility. But in the meantime, our streets aren't being swept. You know, we're dirty. And if any of you have travelled through Europe this summer on your holidays, which I'm sure a lot of you have, lovely holidays, lovely places, lovely clean places, and you come back here home and it's filthy, it's squalid, and it's a disgrace, quite frankly. And we must do better, because anybody visiting our beautiful towns, Godalming, Haslemere, Farnham, where I live, will think, what a filthy community you are, how bad your services are. So we really must do better.
Well, I think Jenny's made notes there to take that back as well. Thank you very much. And, you know, street cleaning generally and obviously any issue at the moment.
Well, for the record, I'd like to just add, I'm thoroughly ashamed of the state of things. I really am. We've got to do better.
Councillor Keane?
Yes, I mean, just to touch on the street cleaning thing, I mean, which I really do get very concerned about the state of the pavements at this time of year, because the leaves are so bad on some of the pavements that old people or people that are unsteady a bit, they're terrified of falling over because they're so slippery, these pavements. And all the leaves are going down the drains, clogging up all the drains, and we have flooding anyway in Tanners Lane and places like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Councillor Hyman, you wish to speak on this?
Well, thank you, Chairman. I was slightly scared by you actually saying that moving to our last item, because I think we've got 14 in planning development and 15 regulatory services. I wanted to mention air quality, which you might think would come under environmental services, but I think it's more under regulatory services now as on the agenda, which is the 15th. And I just wanted to make sure you weren't going to miss that. We'll be moving on to planning development on page 78, page 50 of the report. Yes. Okay, great. And air quality I can cover under 15, yes?
Yeah, certainly.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, please, on Councillor King mentioned leaves. Is it council here responsibility or is it Surrey County Council responsibility? What's the latest position? I know there is some idea about who should be doing what.
Who answers that question?
Councillor Follows says he can answer it.
Right, Councillor Follows?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. So a couple of things. Broadly, when there's leaves in the high streets and things like that, it usually does fall to Waverley to a degree, but it's usually a matter of whether it's unsafe or not, as opposed to whether it's untidy in any way. Reflecting on Councillor Hess's point, a glutton would have been quite good, but it was not something that Waverley could afford on its own, which is why we asked if Farnham Town Council would contribute to the cost. It sounds like if you're willing to take on a substantial part of Waverley's waste contract, that Farnham Town Council are willing to pay some money in towards doing this, at which point I will gladly engage with Farnham as to what spec they would like. The reason I raised the issue of an objective being clarified or codified or even put in here to start with is that my hope would be that you would all as a group reflect on the contractual requirements that we have with Biffa and construct an objective appropriate to the task. You'll know full well, I'm sure, that I didn't sign the Biffa contract. It was signed by Councillor Andrew Bolton in April 2019, and I am therefore managing a contract that I did not sign or largely agree with. So I would ask this committee, if you've got a particular view on an objective on this matter, that you consider it formally and add an objective to be measured. You are all able to propose to the executive additional or modified measures in this document. It is not entirely down to the executive to add things. This is also with you.
Thank you very much. Can we move on then to the last two items, which is planning development and the regulatory services. Claire, do you wish to say anything at this point?
No, Chair,
thank you. Hiding away there. Councillor Hyman needs to speak.
Well, yes, thank you, Chairman. There's a lot. It's a very wide topic, planning and development, and there's a lot we could look at. But just to go to page 79 or page 51 of the report, 79 of the agenda papers, and looking at the very end of Claire Upton Brown's report there at the top of the page, it's at the third paragraph. You'll see the second half of it talks about the Planning Advisory Services Development Management Challenge Toolkit. And I took quite a good look at that when our problems with the KPIs on quantity of developments were giving us a problem. And I think it would be very useful for us, but I don't know whether you would want it for this committee or whether to do it some other way, to go through the Planning Advisory Services toolkits, because there are a lot of things which I think really should have been looked at before we decided what we were going to do, 6 months ago. I think we would perhaps take another look at how we're doing things and our improvement plan for the planning service. If we were to study that between us, would you be interested in looking at the PAS, or do you think there's a better way that we can have councillors involved in that? Because I think you'll see it's at the final paragraph there, says over the next quarter a workshop will be held with staff to identify further service improvements. I think that overview and scrutiny, or at least councillors in some way, should be involved in that. Thank you.
We did say revise. We certainly talked, didn't we, about the different KPIs and what we should have, and nothing to do with PAS. Just generally, and again, I'm going back to the Jenny Elstays that we. Claire, have you got any comment on that?
Yeah, so probably a couple of comments. So I have actually held a workshop with my team, which was held the Thursday before last in the council chamber. It was partly a meet and greet for everybody, so we actually physically got everybody in sort of council chambers that physically with each other. And then we had followed that with a sort of an hour and a half workshop to just capture some of the issues that we thought we needed to address and some areas that we might need to look at in terms of improvement. And that's captured some headlines, and there's a further piece of work that's going to be done over the next week to actually get some more detailed analysis, particularly from the contractors,
come in with a fresh pair of eyes, with lots of experience in working with other authorities. And therefore, I personally want to get the benefit of that from those contractors and capture good practice from elsewhere, and make sure that we embed it in the way we work going forward. But also, you know, again, they come with a fresh pair of eyes and see things slightly differently from maybe the people who have been doing things a certain way for the last period of time. So there is some really positive work going on at the moment, which I'm more than happy to share with others. Obviously we have in part reflected on the PAS report and the issues that were identified there, and whether they have been fully addressed or whether there are things that sit below those issues that we might pick up again and go into more detail to look at service improvement.
I think, you know, my response to that is what I always say to you: just tell us everything whenever you've got it and we can see it, because if we don't have the information, we can't then base our future work programme on anything. You know, we do need to know what's going on and why, and if there's any way that, you know, we can help. But in terms of, you know, looking at, as we're doing at the moment at KPIs, I mean, are you quite content that you will come up with a system that will be as robust as it possibly can be to make sure that the planning service is improving all the time?
Yeah, in terms of the KPIs, I'm quite satisfied that that reflects the performance through the work doing with Jenny on the service management plan, and that will actually pick up working with the portfolio holder and the more generic work that will be done in the next year to actually improve areas of the service to our customers. But also, I think, ultimately, the important thing is to actually make sure that we're providing quality development across the whole of the borough. Maybe some of the problems that Sam shared with you would be less if we're creating really, really positive places, we're designing out crime, we're creating healthy environments where people's health and well-being and mental well-being is addressed in the environment they live in, the landscaping, the connectivity, all those things that actually good planning delivers and minimises the impact on multiple other public services.
I agree with you. I'm just amazed that we're still discussing the same thing sort of 20 years on, and you think we're not learning at all. You know, we've not got it yet. Councillor Munro.
Yes, thank you. The KPIs get under the processing of major applications. I wonder whether that KPIs absolutely really captures the performance there, because you're saying it's the percentage determined within 13 weeks, but it can't be, or with an agreed extension of time. Well, Waverley has a whip hand here under the timetable. It's a bold developer who sort of goes to court and says, I don't agree this extension. So I don't think that's a very challenging KPI, I'm afraid. I'm not doubting that it really is 100%, but we've set the rules, and I think the rules ought to be modified so that we're really under pressure to determine these major planning applications as expeditiously as possible, because it does cause quite considerable distress amongst residents. I've got a couple of major applications going through the system, and residents just don't know where they are and how long it's going to be before it's settled, and crucially, when they can actually make their contribution. If they've got a deadline when it goes to planning committee and all that sort of thing, then they actually can marshal their forces more effectively to, in most cases, frankly, to challenge it. Could we have a look at it again? Because I don't think the situation is as rosy as that row of green suggests.
Okay.
Good. Right, stop there.
Yep, stop there.
I won't say anything then.
Yeah, I think you've said more than enough there. That's fine. I think we've got the point, you know, and yeah, I mean, we want to have a good service. Poor old Claire and her other horses got wind of it's all red we moan at them, it's all green we say them, you know, it's not just it's not good enough. So you know, but basically, we all, it's for every single person in the borough, we all want the best, DM service we can possibly have, and anything that we can do to help that. I'd like to move on, but I'll take Councillor Busby if it's relevant.
Thank you. Yeah, just fantastic to see such sort of sustained improvement really over quite a long period now, which is great. Been thinking about staff turnover. Achieving these targets, is it still, obviously to turn it around initially, it was a huge effort from everybody involved, but I'm just wondering whether in terms of pressure and workload on individual officers, whether things are, reluctant to say easier, but less extreme than they were to get to this point, as the backlog reduced and things like that.
So in terms of, I can't really comment on the extremity or pressure, because obviously I wasn't here and wasn't sort of the witness to that.
Yes.
But in terms of, I guess, staff morale and well-being, staff are seeming to be very positive at the moment. We're beginning to work through the backlog. We're putting some additional measures in to make sure that we are supporting staff and giving direction and unblocking things when they get unblocked by a range of measures. So I think the answer is yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. At the moment.
Yeah, if I could just take Councillor Hyman, then I'd like to draw a line under this and move on. We have given them a long looking at tonight. So Councillor Hyman, you want to speak on air quality?
Sorry, I was just wanted to clear up a little, or ask if we could have cleared up a little bit of confusion that appears to have crept into the indicators that we've got on page 51 there, which is nice to see that it's virtually all green, because obviously that's really good. Things have improved from the problem that we had when we weren't during COVID, we weren't extending times, but under P151, which is a national indicator, so we can't mess with that and change the rules on it, so to speak. I don't think it mentions a national indicator 157A, which includes the extensions. Does 151, the figures that we're showing there, not include those with time extensions? And furthermore, can you confirm that all three of those that are sort of green down the side, which are national indicators, are all with an agreed time extension? Because the text below, soon after this, tells us that that it does apply to the second indicator, but doesn't say about the third. So there's some confusion in between the text and the table there as to what we're actually reporting there. And also it's worth pointing out that the LP 152 and 154, those are quality of decision making, because there's a lot of people who think that we don't have any indicators about the quality, it's just the quantity, which is the top ones that you see there. So just so members are aware that we do have sort of both quantity and quality of decision making covered in this, but it's not absolutely clear to me, so I doubt if it is to anybody else, what those are reporting. So if someone could explain that now or outside the meeting, if not.
I think we'll do it outside the meeting if you don't mind, because we really have been doing this a long time. Do you want to say something else?
Yeah, just well, we're both very keen on you and I have been hot on air quality for quite some time, Chairman, and you know that it was put through in March at a council meeting in March. The Air Quality Action Plan was put through. I am concerned there was a 6 months limit on that, and it was meant to come back to us because Surrey's proposals to satisfy the law were going to be were going to come forward. They haven't, and we haven't heard anything. Is it possible for you to put some pressure on them, please, to bring it back and get it onto this your agenda, Madam Chairman? Because I'm sure you'd like to do that.
Yeah, we have done that, Councillor Hyman. So.
Right, just with the plans that you and I know are going to increase congestion significantly in Farnham, to assume that that's going to reduce pollution is a bit far-fetched, I think, and so we're going to have to keep an eye on this still. Thanks.
No, thank you.
It was raised with
right, fine. So that will be done. So if everyone's content, I would like to move on, otherwise we really will be here all night. On to item 8. It says Katie Webb, but I don't see Katie
No,
Webb.
I think it's
So it's David, David Hollingsworth. This is the ASBO. You've asked for an update, basically because things are changing, aren't they? So David, if you would like to introduce this for us, that would be great.
Yes, thank you. Good evening to you all. Just to formally introduce myself then, David Hollingsworth. I'm the Antisocial Behaviour Officer for Waverley Borough Council. I'm on day 17. I'm pretty new in post. So I'm still at this process of finding out how Waverley works, how everything fits together, and here tonight to talk about one particular area that I've been looking at over the last 3 weeks. And apologies for not being there in person tonight. It would have been great to meet up with you in person, but maybe on the next one. So I want to talk to you about public space protection orders, and specifically the one we have in here, we have in Waverley, which is due for review and due for renewal, if that's what we want to do next year. Just to give you a bit of background, and I'm going to refer to them now as PSPOs, otherwise I'll be here all night saying public space protection orders. They were introduced by the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act of 2014. They're one of a number of tools that are in that act, which give a wide-ranging flexible powers for local authorities, which recognise that we're probably the best place to understand the impact of antisocial behaviour and the issues that we might be facing. It gives us the authority to draft and implement PSPOs in response to particular issues affecting communities, provided certain criteria and legal tests are met. And I'm not necessarily going to go into those tonight unless people want me to. I just really want to give you an overview of where we are with our one and some of the timelines that I'm going to be working towards. It streamlines some of the existing powers that we had around designated public orders, dog control orders, gating orders, a whole range of different orders. And it streamlined them into one so that we could actually tackle issues with one particular order. As I said, it's council-led response, and it's not about stopping things. It's about creating the opportunity for public spaces to be enjoyed by everybody, free of antisocial behaviour. So it's not about stopping activity. It's not about curtailing people meeting and doing that. It really is about making sure that we've got the right prohibitions, if you like, in place if we are having specific problems in an area. And it can prohibit or it can require certain things to be done. So it just depends on what it is you're trying to achieve in a particular area. And breaches of an order are an offence for which we can issue fixed penalty notices, or we can actually look at some of the other powers that sit within the Antisocial Behaviour Act. Our PSPO, the one that I'm talking about today, is split into two really. One is in relation to geographical area, Godalming and Farncombe. It was about tackling incidences of antisocial behaviour that were occurring a few years ago when this order was put together, and it tackles three main areas. One's around drinking in public places. One's around prohibition on the use of drugs, psychoactive substances and other intoxicating substances, but together with antisocial behaviour. So it's not just about stopping drinking in public. It's not about stopping other activity in public. It's about how that fits in with antisocial behaviour as well. So they're the three main areas that it tackles. The fourth part of the order relates to specified green or public spaces across the whole of the borough in relation to unauthorised bonfires and barbecues on the land in those areas. And I'll cover that in a minute as to what that's happened there. That gives you an idea of what the order is there for. And as I said, it prohibits certain activity or requires people to do things in order to make sure that drinking in public and other activities don't create antisocial behaviour. So the PSPO was commenced on 21st of April 2021. 22nd of April 2021, and lasts for 3 years. So it is due for review by the third week in April 2024. It's been incorporated into local policing plans. I spoke with the borough commander last week to see how well they're using it. They see it as a great tool for them. They can incorporate their own local plans. They can task outside resources to look at areas. And I know that they have done some work, particularly around the Farncombe area, to try and actually tackle some of the issues that they've got there. And I understand that as a result of that, there's some youth provision, youth offer has been improved in that area. It's also been used extensively during the summer months, and this is the fourth part of it, by the Parks and Countryside Services. And I think you mentioned it earlier on in relation to Frensham Ponds, where they've been able to do some really sterling work out there and use the powers there quite regularly to tackle some of the issues they would have there around people using barbecues and setting fires, etc. I probably would suggest that any other implementation of the order has been pretty soft over the last few years in terms of how we've worked with it from the borough. I think there are opportunities there, particularly around how we use the fixed penalty notices, how we use maybe some of the community protection warnings and community protection notices that go alongside it. But I think that's something that I'm going to be picking up more when I do the more in-depth review. At the moment, I'm collecting that information on activity and achievements. As I say, I've only really had a quick overview of it in the last few weeks, but I am going to be beginning to collect the information, which is mainly relying on our police and Parks and Countryside people just to pull that together, but also looking at evidence of what other areas may need to be included in the order going forward. And I've already had conversations around potential for the order maybe to be extended out to places like Milford and Whitley. And I also heard Councillor Rabini's comments about Hazelmere earlier on. The important thing about it is it isn't a catch-all for everything. It's not something you could just say, right, we'll whack it across the whole of the borough. It's got to be working towards specific activities, specific problems, specific issues. And I think we've just got to be sure that we can actually resource it as well. It's quite important that the resources are there to actually deal with what the order is there to try and prevent or to try and encourage. So off the back of that, there will be extensive consultation, publicity, notification with public stakeholders, partners. In terms of the renewal, not as much as there would have been if it was a brand new one, but certainly if we're looking at new areas and new activities, we will need to make sure that we do that consultation. And that's going to be, I think, the longest piece of work that we need to do for the review. And as I said, we need to have that done if we're going to renew the order by the 21st of April at the latest. Otherwise, it will run out and we would need to start again. So working on that, I'm looking at sort of 4.5 months that we're going to be working towards. So I'm, as I said, already beginning to pick up on that evidence and starting to look at how we can do that consultation. The work on the PSPO obviously filters into other work that I'm going to be doing around a corporate antisocial behaviour policy, so that we've actually got a policy that covers everything we do across Waverley, not just certain parts like housing, but to actually try and bring it together and make sense of how we deal with antisocial behaviour in its totality, and also some sort of training program that goes with it. I think one of the things I've very quickly realised is that we do need to make sure that our staff and the public are fully aware of what it is we're trying to achieve and where we want to get to, and what the issues are there for us. That's a quick whistle-stop tour of the review of PSPOs. Hopefully I haven't spoken for too long.
No, not at all.
More than happy to take any questions.
Right, I've got two speakers on this. Councillor Gale, would you like to go first, as you've got a brief mention in the presentation?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I had a lovely chat with David yesterday on the phone, so it was really nice to find out about him. The reason I've come tonight really truly is just to update people, because when the original order was put in place, it was acknowledged that as it stopped at the Squires Garden Centre, it could push problems over into Whitley and Milford. And it was always promised that when it was looked at again, Whitley and Milford would be looked at. So I just wanted you to know the incidents of criminal activity, arson, menace, and it all continues right up to today. The latest being another fire on the Jubilee Field in Milford, which is being investigated by our local neighbourhood officer, Cat Farmer. Briefly, cans of paraffin, kindling and logs were stolen from the SO garage, taken to the Jubilee Field, and a fire was started. Now, this is a repeat of something that happened in July, so we've had it before. That also happened at our Burton Pavilion. We had a fire at the Burton Pavilion set by whoever knows, I don't know. Other crimes across the parish, we have vandalism and theft in our allotments in Milford and Whitley. Unfortunately, someone had left an air rifle in one of their stores and that got stolen. All these things haven't been followed up by police. They're all reported. They don't get followed up because the police don't have the resources. I don't blame the police at all. It's just the resources aren't there. We've had things like menace at the Jubilee Field. We have elderly people who live close to the Jubilee Field and they are abused. Catapults being used against residents. Vandalism in our Chichester Hall. One incident that happened, which is quite notable. There were so many youths causing a disturbance in the Whitley Recreation Ground one evening. A member of the public called the police, who did send a young lady on her own. Unfortunately, she was grossly outnumbered, so couldn't even go in to do anything. So we're hoping that had there been a PSPO order, there may have been more resources available for that lady when she attended. And so really that's why we wanted to bring this forward to this committee to say yet again, please, can it be extended across Whitley and Milford and cover the railway stations? Because we have the youngsters getting on a train, alighting at Milford or Whitley, and then they start to cause the problems in the villages. And I think they even, John, go down as far as Hazelmere, don't they, on the train?
That's traditional as well, yes.
Yes. So really and truly, it's just, you know, a plea from Whitley Parish Council and ward councillors, please can it be looked at?
Yes, no, I'm sure. Councillor Collins, you put your name down?
Yes, so other than being leader of this council, I'm also leader of Godalming Town Council and one of the councillors for the two wards that were most impacted in Godalming, and specifically I'm the person that asked for this order in the first place for a number of reasons. Antisocial behaviour was quite rife in certain parts of Godalming. It was originally in Farncombe. When putting in the first version of this order in and some initial police activity, it moved the issue around. And quite a common issue here is that once you put an order in a place, it's like moving a bubble under plastic. It doesn't really ever go. It just moves to other areas without complementary efforts in other regards. Now, for me, the orders provide the stick, but we also needed to deal with the carrot. And at Godalming Town Council, we instituted an entirely new youth service from scratch to deal with the other side of that issue. And I would certainly argue that the fall in antisocial behaviour has been the stick on one side, but the carrot on the other, dealing with the other side of that issue. Now, in terms of Milford and Whitley, Maxine, you absolutely know I'm entirely in favour of the extension of this order to include Milford and Whitley, and at the same time, as we have been discussing in our other hats, the extension of the complementary support of the youth provision into Milford and Whitley as well through the other provision that we've got. So my hope is, yeah, precisely. That's the first wave. The first wave of that is already in place. So I think it's always best, if possible, to start with the good rather than the stick. But I do think we have to have the tools in place to do that. So I am entirely in favour of the extension of that order. And certainly myself and the portfolio holder for enforcement will be arguing for proper evidence gathering to extend that order with the support of the parish. I would also extend the comments about unauthorised barbecues and other things like that. I mean, particularly those of you who have heathland and commons in your wards, you will almost regularly every year have issues with barbecues, people setting things on fire, whether they mean to or not. As with the fixed penalty notices for antisocial behaviour for youth and other various issues, We can only set fines at a certain level, but it's actually set by central government. We can't give very heavy punitive fines. As I've mentioned before, I would like to give extremely punitive fines to anybody silly enough to set up a barbecue and set fire to, you know, some of the commons in our borough. So we are limited and we set them at the maximum that we can. And I have written to the government asking when their review of those levels will be undertaken. I will just finally conclude with a comment, just because everybody, when we talk about antisocial behaviour, assumes a certain type of person, a youth, being antisocial by the church or down by down by parts of Godalming. One encounter I had with a lady who reported youth antisocial behaviour in her late 80s was reporting youths, the youngest of which was 46. So I would always just counter against thinking of you as antisocial behaviour by a certain type of individual. Many people are capable of it.
I'd like to bring the committee in now. I noticed David's got his hand up again, and please, I don't want to hear about everybody's personal experience of where they live, because we all know what we're talking about here. We're talking about, extending this, and including Milford and obviously the review and everything else that's supposed to go on. And I think everyone will be very supportive of that. Councillor Keane, you indicated.
Yes, I mean, I think it's excellent to have these public space orders, and in fact, I would say that you could also include Haslemere in that, because we do have problems. But I mean, one of the things that, as Councillor Abini touched on, the fact that we don't have any police around, they don't know what's going on. So it's down to the public to ring the police to tell them. And you very often don't get a response anyway. But I mean, there are drug issues, and it goes on our greens and what have you. It's reported, but nothing happens. So I think that's the first thing. The first thing is that the police do not respond, and the answer comes back always: they haven't got resources. We used to have excellent PCSOs who had near to everything, but they've gone. The second thing is youth provision. I know it's not always youth, but youth provision is non-existent anymore. So you do have antisocial behaviour because of boredom. Quite frankly, they've got kids just getting into mischief. So there's a whole raft of things that I think need looking at in the whole context of this. But I think the first thing is that it's somehow getting the police to come to a meeting, and so that things can be explained. Why is this being sorted?
It brings us back to our partnership, doesn't it? I'll just take David as he's indicated. He may have something to say, and also about the sheer size of this. I mean, we can't put one over the whole of Waverley, much as we'd all be delighted with that probably. So if you could answer at any point you've heard.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think it was picking up on Councillor Gow and the conversation we had. I mean, certainly the review will include gathering that evidence across those areas and any other areas that people feel that we should be looking at. I'm quite happy to incorporate that into that, because it makes sense to do that all in one go. And then actually be able to make that decision about what is the right way of actually moving it forward. And it may well be that a PSPO isn't the right thing. It may be other tools that we can use. But certainly I want to keep an open mind on that as we go through. So that. And then just to pick up on the other comment that Paul made about the FPNs not being high enough. There's a community safety review that's just been carried out, and one of the recommendations is that it should be raised to £500. At the moment, it's £100. So I think there is an appetite to actually give us more powers there, that when we do issue FPNs, that they can have a little bit more teeth.
That's good news. Councillor Rabin?
Yes, thank you, Chair. David mentioned about gathering evidence, etc. One of my problems is, at the moment, the police seem completely unable to form any sort of policy on CCTV. And yet we all read on newspapers and everywhere how good CCTV is at gathering information. It used to be we at Waverley had cameras here. I was phoned up last week to talk about 2 cameras in our car parks, but apparently nobody's using them anymore. They're just sitting there doing absolutely nothing when they could be evidence gathering or whatever. So I do feel that we're missing tricks here in CCTV or other areas, working closely with the police or ourselves in establishing how we monitor areas.
I mean, what's coming out tonight is very much that we want a joined up approach, don't we, to what all the issues that we have across the borough that we all suffer from. And we've got to work out a way of, you know, incorporating all the items that we know are useful and using them all in the best place to get the maximum sort of impact. So I'll take Councillor Gale, and then David, if you could just come back and just explain quite how broad we could do. What I really want to do is to pick out, you know, when people say that we need evidence, we need more CCTV, where does this all fit in, is what I'm really trying to say with what we're trying to achieve. Councillor Gale again.
Yeah, just quickly, what Councillor Rabini was saying about CCTV. We in Whitley and Milford, we have one lot of CCTV, which is on our Burton Pavilion, but it can only be aimed around the pavilion because there are children playing on the sports fields, and all the other areas, there are children playing, and you can't have CCTV monitoring children playing, which is why, of course, you can't sort of have as much monitoring as you'd like to have. I mean, the ones on our Burton Pavilion are very good, and we've got a lovely photo of the chap that was trying to destroy the camera, and that was one bonus. But no, that's the problem with the coverage of CCTV.
So David, can you give us some hope that basically we can get the evidence, enlarge the existing area if that's necessary, but how can you, or how can we, how can Waverley sort of tie up some of the other loose ends in terms of lack of policing, the lack of CCTV, and going right back to when Sam was talking about the, you know, the vulnerable people in the borough. I mean, what can we specifically achieve?
I think that's a very broad question for me, but I'll give it a go. Evidence, again, it relies on people telling us what's going on. And I know that when you talk to people, they say, well, we don't report anything because nothing gets done. But if you don't report anything, then nothing's happening. And I think it's quite important that we encourage our residents to report those issues when they happen, regardless of whether they get a response or not, because the reports that go into the police do get recorded. When I go back to that, I'll be using the police quite a bit to get the evidence that we need to see what we're doing with the order, and a lot of that will come from their contact centres and the records of people that have phoned in with those issues. So the fact that they haven't actually dealt with it is not material for me. It is about getting that information in. And I'll also be using, obviously, our own people in terms of housing and environmental health, parks and countryside, all of those, to actually where we're getting those reports in across the council. I can actually pull that back in as well. So I think the evidence is there, but we do need to encourage residents to report more. CCTV isn't a panacea for everything. It has an important place to play, but again, once you start looking at CCTV, you then have to look at the resources to do something about what it picks up. So the two do go hand in hand. But certainly, from a point of view of evidence, if it shows that CCTV is a way forward and we can do it within the guidelines that we would have to do it, then there's no reason why we couldn't. But I think it needs that, for me, that corporate, I was talking about antisocial behaviour policy or strategy that actually says this is how we're going to deal with things. And if we get to this point, we're going to put this in place. And if we get to that point, and we've got the major part to play with that, along with the Safer Waverley Partnership. It's how we can actually work together with our partners to get the resources we need to do it. So I think it is positive. I think it's a timely time. It's timely for me to be looking at this around the PSPO and the antisocial behaviour policy. And I think we can actually start pulling those things together to have a way forward to deal with some of the things that we've got to deal with.
I think we can safely say that the will of this committee is for you to go ahead and, you know, we recommend, you know, support for the consultation, all the work you've got to do before, whatever the date was, next year. I can't see anybody dissenting from that at all. Did you want to come back?
I just wanted to pick up on something David said about people reporting, you know, if they don't report it, the police don't know. But there is, in some cases, there is a fear factor. And I think we all have to recognise, I mean, I actually had to deal with something in Hazelmere, which I'm not prepared to talk about now, but there was a huge fear factor. And it was only through me working with the local police officer at the time that it could be resolved. But none of the people who knew what was going on were prepared to tell the police because they were frightened of backlash.
Yeah. I mean, as David said, you know, we should, as councillors, be encouraging the public to report to the police. Presumably, you can report to the police anonymously for most things, and presumably that will still get ticked off or, you know, registered or whatever. So, you know, we should be encouraging.
We should.
You know, I mean, whether we can do it corporately or individually or both, to get people to report antisocial behaviour and tell them that although, you know, they won't see an automatic response on a policeman there instantly, it will actually be part of the evidence base that goes into improving the way we run the order in the future, and also whatever else we need to do in the borough. David, do you wish to come back?
Yeah, just picking up on that, 0800 555 111. It's Crime Stoppers. It's anonymous. Anybody can ring 0800 555 111, and that will be dealt with anonymously and will be picked up. So that's the way to do that if people want to report anonymously.
And we have to really explain to them that it is picked up. I mean, I think, you know, people do get fed up. They don't see the action, therefore they think there isn't any action from, you know, any response. So we must make it very, very clear in anything we send out and when we're speaking to residents that, you know, they do actually have that power. And then we can
just to pick up on that, part of the policy that I want to put together will include that sort of communication. We really do need to improve the way we get that message out to people about what they can and can't do, and how we can help them.
And will we get this policy back here?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I would imagine so. I'm still learning, so it will go wherever it needs to go, and if it's here, then it will definitely be here.
Jake, do you want to say?
I was just going to say, in the interest of concretising what we've just said, could we maybe suggest a recommendation?
Yes,
Do a quick vote, maybe something along the lines of.
We don't normally vote, but we can do.
Just to make it legal, if you like, why not? Maybe perhaps to resolve to recommend the executive. What did we say, to extend the PSPO into Whitley and Milford, and were we also in favour of the extension of the youth provision?
We
Yes.
Encourage it, and it's.
We can resolve to recommend.
We've got the youth provision already just started in Milford. They're coming with their mobile bus. So
All right.
that's all
I mean,
coming.
I think, you know, it's back to this joint of thinking across the borough is what I'm trying to achieve, because basically, you know, it's the same issue. You know, poor children create problems, and we need the youth provision, which we can't possibly set up. So it's more a sort of encouraging
What I've put
local
is,
initiatives, isn't it?
that the committee recommend and support the review of the PSPO to renew it in April 24, and the potential of extending it to include Whitley and Milford.
And Hazelmere. And possibly Hazelmere.
And mine. Chairman, I don't think we ought to mention specific localities.
Okay,
Well,
okay, or the potential of extending it if evidence supports it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like, if we can, to move on from that, but thank you, David. Welcome to your first ONS meeting, and very, very helpful. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Item 9 has been withdrawn, so there's no point in speaking on it. So which brings us to the final item, which is item 10. And this was basically, I wanted to, well, Stockman's right back. Councillor Gale raised with me the difficulties of planning conditions and thought we should, as a committee, be looking at it. And so I think, you know, the idea was originally that we will perhaps get this in a more structured form. But tonight's idea is just to look at this, see whether there's something we need to delve into further, and also see if there's a method by which we can improve the situation yet again. So I'll throw it open to Councillor Gale, because she raised the issue and has come on to explain why.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll try not to be too long and drawn out, but really I need to give an overview of why this has sort of come around. In my ward, Whitley and Milford, which we know, we've got two large developments, the Milford Golf Course, which was approved in 2019 and is ongoing, and the newly approved Hurst Farm Secrets. Since the Milford Golf Course was granted permission, there have been a number of occasions when conditions or Section 106 agreements placed upon the development have been challenged by the developer for amendment or even been discharged with some errors. When a developer sends in a request to discharge a condition, it is assessed by officers before being uploaded to the portal with the application, the supporting papers and the discharge notice. Once a condition has been discharged, obviously it's final and then there's no going back. This was identified a while back. We, the ward councillors and parish council, were promised by a previous head of department and a member of the executive, who I think was either Andy or Nick, I can't remember, that discharge paperwork would be uploaded in real time. So those of us watching particular areas and sites could pick it up and maybe help with local knowledge. Conditions are placed upon planning applications for reasons, sometimes because officers need something technical to be addressed, or the local knowledge can see that what is proposed would be inappropriate. Some conditions can be troublesome to the developer and they therefore try to amend. Briefly, we've seen recent cases for trying to remove text, for instance. Instead of saying complete before development commences, the developer has tried to amend to after the development reaches damp-proof course. Not a good idea when it's the entrance to the site. The Section 106 agreement regarding the split of affordable housing and private, some of you may remember, this was on Milford Golf Course, and the developer wanted to reduce the number of affordable homes. By a stroke of luck, I and some of my colleagues at Whitley heard about this, and we were able to ask for the decision not to be taken just under delegated authority, but to come to committee, where thankfully the developer's request was denied by a majority vote. There are others, but we've only got a few minutes tonight, so it's really and truly, we want to be able to comment. You can't comment once it's gone through the system. Once it's through the system, it's there. An instance on that, we had the chance to comment on the transport management plan for Chewsley Fruit Farm. They wanted to take the HGV movements along Church Road in Milford, which is really inappropriate for HGVs. But Highways listened to us and said, okay, we won't let them take them to Church Road. Unfortunately, the construction transport management plan for Milford Golf Course was submitted, and that's been approved. And yes, the HGVs are going to be using Church Road. Nothing we can do about that because it's been approved. Local knowledge there would have picked that up. So really, Chairman, what I'm coming to say to you is, please can somebody start to discuss this, because there are lots of us out there in all the different wards and boroughs, and we do watch what's happening, but we can't watch unless the portal is in real time for us. It's no good letting us see it afterwards. So that's my plea.
Yes, and yes, I'll have you in a second, Claire. Can I just say, I should really have said at the beginning, one of the problems we have, and the new people on the committee will probably realise this, is we recommend that permission is granted, but it's subject to all those conditions that we read, 40, I think, on one of the last ones we had. Now, we only grant because we think those conditions will do their job. And if we don't, we change the conditions. And we can add conditions, we can strengthen conditions. Over the years, we've done both. So it is difficult when it gets out of our hands and we see the permission granted, but it's not the permission with the conditions that we thought were being put on. And this is, I mean, Councillor Gers just articulated it so clearly in her ward, but of course it, it happens across, again, the whole borough. So Claire, basically, how can we work this better so that we can get at this crucial point when you are discharging conditions, that local knowledge in we've got a protocol, can we add anything in there or whatever?
This has already been actioned.
All
I
right.
asked the admin team
Oh,
some
right.
weeks ago to upload in real time, and that was done that day. So this is happening.
Fantastic. And so we just solved it all. I mean, the whole point about this is that we do need.
Simple ask.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. But I think there is a broader point, because yes, if we can see it, we can then act on it. But I suppose, I mean, basically, do you want members getting involved in the process is really what I'm asking.
I think what we've got to remember is that a lot of the things are technical. Yes. So we will be seeking advice from technical consultees for the response. We've got a limited time period, and obviously if we don't discharge the condition within that time period, the applicant can serve a notice on us, and effectively that triggers the discharge. And so those are the constraints. I think it would be completely and utterly unruly, and I'd say this to any member in any council, and I have in the past, if all members begin to get involved in all planning conditions, we'll all fall over and probably fall out with each other as well, if I'm honest. So, you know, that just isn't feasible. But I think on specific conditions, such as the landscaping condition,
which we haven't got to yet.
No, well, we haven't got to it yet because we haven't got the advice, but you know, that we bring, you know, parties in because it's of such significance or it's so sensitive. So on selected cases, but I think that has to be done on a sort of communication, case by case basis where appropriate.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, we don't get involved, do we, as members in the condition? No. It's just when there's a big condition and we see an NMA coming in or something like that, that we get.
Well, a non-material amendment is different from a condition.
Well, yes, but they can change conditions, don't they?
We can seek to vary a condition by formal submission.
Vary a condition,
that's
not
all
change
the process, and that's the process that you're able to engage in.
Because, you know, as I say, we give the commission because we think that condition, number 17 or whatever, is going to be discharged completely. Right, I do have some speakers on this, apart from Councillor Gale, and I've seen a member of the committee who wants to speak. Councillor Follis, do you wish to speak?
Only to say that I'm sure you yourself, among others here, being an experienced member of the planning committees, surely can't be sitting there and thinking anything other than its best endeavours and hope that these conditions are ever done. I mean, the ability to enforce conditions is minimal. We all know the fact that this is not a sort of police level investigatory and evidentiary process that planning enforcement is constituted as. So our ability to actually police those conditions is again fairly limited. And that's assuming that we have the resourcing capacity to actually enforce it anyway in terms of our own numbers of staff. And that's before we get to the ability for developers to appeal, vary conditions, engage in other practices that don't help this process. So, I mean, I think on top of all the things that Claire and the planning team have done and are doing, I think it's just my duty to continue to inject that realism about planning policy in this country, and I'll probably leave it at that. I'm sure Councillor Townsend has also registered. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, Councillor Townsend.
Thank you. I just would like to say, obviously, the stuff is going on in real time now. I mean, generally with planning conditions, we're more concerned about the larger applications generally than the small, you know, extensions or one house. So it is on the larger applications. So, you know, if members if there has been a particular application that, you know, members are interested in or particular condition they're concerned about, I mean, the case officer would only be too happy to help you, talk you through, let you know where you are with it. Obviously, you know, it's not possible to monitor every single condition on every single planning application with members, but on the larger applications, which are you know, there's not a huge number of larger applications, so and there will usually be one or two conditions that are most contentious, so please do contact the case officer. And obviously, if, you know, if there's anything, you know, if you want to email me, if there's anything I can do to help, you know, if the case officer's a bit busy, you know, I'm quite happy to help them and to nudge where appropriate.
I don't know whether Chair, you want me, are you moving on to the?
No, not, I'm going to take councillor Hyman and councillor.
So you're not moving on to
Townsend.
the revised structure and planning and all that, so you
No,
can
not
take them
yet,
separately?
no.
Okay, thank you.
Right, councillor Hyman?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I didn't know whether you were going to move on to the resources, the departmental resources, but there's quite a strong link between the resources and what we've just discussed in respect of monitoring planning conditions. There was a 352-page report for the for last week's resources ONS, and so I think you're quite lucky here tonight, Chairman. We've got a fairly light agenda, but this is really important because the monitoring planning conditions, there was a legal judgment from the High Court this summer, which I think was CG Fry. I can circulate it to members later. In respect to the catch-all principle, all of both EIA and habitat applications, which covers virtually the whole of our borough, the legal ruling confirms the catch-all principle applies, and that when we're discharging conditions or at a section 173 section 73 stage, altering the development, then we have to look at the lawfulness of the application all over again. It's very important, therefore, now that we do monitor as members any changes that are going through, because if it's not good, we can stop it.
Because the item was really, do we want to discuss this further? And I think we discovered we don't, because we've now got prompt posting of items, so we can carry on with that. You're taking a much broader sort of look. Well, we're not going to do a broader look anymore, councillor. I think we'll have to.
No, I was looking in terms of resources. Sorry, Chairman, I didn't explain properly.
No, well, can we come on to resources in a minute? And I'll take councillor Townsend.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Claire, can I just request that when these conditions are looking to be discharged, that if the councillor has actually spoken about it at the planning meeting, that they are actually notified? Because I know there's people around here which have objected to certain planning conditions, but towards the planning application, and conditions have then been set. So it would be nice if those conditions are going to be disregarded for us to be notified in the way of an email, even as a prompt.
Yeah.
Because not many of us actually talk against a planning application, whether this is a group application or whether it's an individual. And I'm more concerned with the individual applications that are coming through.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And I will take that away and try and put in a almost foolproof system to actually make sure, because as you know, quite often it's maybe a year or 2 years between the grant of permission or the resolution to grant and delivery on site, by which time everybody's history's disappeared. So I'll try and think of a foolproof system of how we pick them up on the post community action list, and then they get tagged within the computer system, so that we don't lose that history, you know, for nobody's fault.
Cool.
Councillor Austin, I'll take you, and then I'd really like to move on. I'd like to finish by 9 if we can, please.
Well, just a suggestion on that point, when we're agreeing the conditions, if there are a couple which the committee think are key, if they are varied, we could maybe star them or something. They could just be highlighted as if they change in the future, we want to know. So at the point at which we give the resolution, the recommendation.
So in terms of just on the sort of procedural matter, we don't vary conditions after the committee have already accepted the conditions, unless it's by way of a formal submission to the council by way of application. The committee might sometimes delegate authority to me to slightly vary the wording of the condition, because sometimes when you're then negotiating on the clauses in 106, you have to revisit the condition to align the two. So you know that's a drafting thing, and I need that delegated power. Otherwise, I'm coming back to planning committee saying I've taken out demand, or then that wouldn't be good for anybody. So I think it comes down to the just tagging the ones that, you know, in committees, and I could think of the example last week on the construction management plan. So it's like, yeah, we definitely need to be talking to the local members about that specific one when that construction management plan comes in, what the content is, and to make sure as well that you can do the policing for us, if you like.
Read my mind.
I thought on my agenda. So
Okay.
yeah, if you leave that with me, I'll just think.
No, that's fine, and of course, we like having the delegation. I mean, there's no way we wouldn't have you doing that, but there are times just occasionally when, you know, it is the larger ones, as you say, apart from the onto the structure of the planning department. I don't know where the conservation area and listed buildings came in, because I didn't request that at all. But don't worry, it's absolutely fine.
Chair, that was actually a request from Councillor.
Oh, fine, no, that's not a problem at all. But I think we all got a revised structure of the planning department in our emails, so we don't need to discuss that. But what do you want to say, Councillor Hess, about the conservation area?
Well, I wanted to really find out whether there were any plans to increase the human resources within the planning department on the conservation area team, because when you think about it, Waverley's a pretty big borough. We've got something like in the region of 1,700 listed buildings throughout the borough. We've got, I think, 43 conservation areas. There's work going on at the moment to propose a new conservation area in Farnham. There are initiatives that the conservation area advisory group at Farnham want to work through with Waverley, because these issues lie with Waverley. Regulation 7, for example, on estate agents, advertising boards, and Article 4 directives and things like that about permitted development. And frankly, for such a big borough and so many buildings and conservation areas, as far as I can make out from what you very kindly arranged to be sent through to me, we've got one full-time conservation area officer, one technician full-time, and the rest of the team are either Section 106 officer or part-time virtual working, an urban planner who's part-time virtual working. I think that's right. Unless you've employed any more in the meantime, in the recent days, but it's very under-resourced. And certainly, I don't know about fellow members around the table where you've got conservation areas in your neck of the woods, but I'm seeing a constant insidious damage and deterioration to historic buildings because we can't control it. And part of that is because we don't have the human resources to do the job. You know, Sophie can't be everywhere all the time, you know, and her technician, they're very much under pressure. And I just would like to ask whether there will be any plans to increase the manpower in the department.
Where?
Full power.
So just to
Passing
confirm
power,
on
sorry.
that point, so we are sort of having an examination of the amount of volume of consultation that passes from one team to another, the technical input from one team to another, so through from conservation to DM and vice versa, and then across to enforcement. So we are doing some work around that to actually really ascertain whether we've got the right skills and resources, or there is too much reliance on people like Sophie as conservation officer, because there's lack of confidence in other officers about making judgments on impact of development of conservation areas. So there is a piece of sort of a broader piece of work around deploying our resources that we've got in the best way possible.
I think from sorry to put words in your mouth, councillor Heston, do stop me, but I have heard you speak about these. I'll just stop for a moment while we're having this. I think one of the problems is that we feel, certainly as Farnham residents, maybe other people do, that the conservation area doesn't get the protection it needs, that we seem to have other conservation areas in the country that seem to have, you know, stronger protection for corporate colours and for, you know, changes to frontages and this sort of thing, that obviously in Farnham we've got a lot of shops that are listed. And, you know, sometimes we wonder whether or not the DM side sort of gives the conservation area the respect it deserves, or whether it can't have any more. You know, we just don't really know what is possible within the conservation area. I mean, we know what we'd like, you know, our aspirations are high. But I think that's something we've spoken about before, haven't we? That, you know, all too often we see things in our conservation area that we don't think we see in other conservation areas in the country.
Okay, well, perhaps that's a conversation outside this meeting.
Yeah, that would be very useful.
But I'd also encourage any other members who feel similarly around the borough to join the conversation, because it's not just Farnham.
No,
it might apply equally to other towns around the borough.
I'm told Councillor Hyman wishes to speak on this, and
thank you.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I absolutely agree with Councillor Hess there, and I think that the obvious point there is that we need more resourcing in that respect, and this is where we link into what went on at the Resources ONS meeting last week, because planning obviously needs a good legal support as well, and the legal department set the pace rather by getting in early, and they're asking to be able to expand the legal department. That one's from 600k to £1 million. So you know, this is going to become a real big issue as we get towards the February budget, because also there was the manager, the asset. What's it called? Our asset investment manager was there, and she is going to be putting in a very good case for them to be expanding and bringing in some more roles to cover. We need more people, so we might well get a late rush of all sorts of departments putting in for more resources. I really hope that you know, we're going to be able to get a good look at this. And prioritise these properly, rather than throw it all out or pick and choose. And you know, we've got some very serious decisions to make in this respect. I think we do need to fit in more ONS meetings or whatever to look at this, because this is going to determine how we, you know, how the council performs over the coming 3 or 4 years, and as we go into further collaboration with Guildford Borough. So we really need to put our heads together and work on this. Because otherwise we could end up just saying, well, we can't really afford to increase all of them by 50% or whatever, every department. So and so therefore turn around and say, no, we're not doing any, which also wouldn't be satisfactory. So I think we need to spend some time on this, Chairman. I'm sure you agree.
I think so, but if I could stop you now, not tonight, we just don't have the time. But I agree with you. It's something that has to, but it will be discussed elsewhere. We don't deal with the budget, you know. This is the issue. Councillor Follows, please don't make it a political diatribe.
I'll certainly try. I've registered to speak there, Madam Chairman, so I'll certainly speak.
I've asked you
Indeed,
to speak.
and I've registered to speak, Madam Chairman, as per my constitutional rights. I will just flag that a number of the statements made here, including by you, are anecdotal, that there is an issue compared to other conservation areas as unknown and unspecified. You, as an ONS, are obviously empowered to create task and finish groups. It would certainly help officers, if you've got concerns about conservation areas, to actually bring forward actual evidence on the subject, so our officers could review that versus the status of issues within our own conservation areas, so they could see the sorts of issues that you were talking about with worked examples. At the moment, we have a number of anecdotes that things in Waverley are not as good in conservation areas as other unnamed other conservation areas. Bring forth the evidence and our officers can look at it. And just to comment on Article 4 directions, I was very keen on the Article 4 direction that we got in Godalming. I was very pleased that when we got it, but the government have degraded the actual rights of those Article 4s. So I mean, right now, for example, I would advise against any town council wasting their time on it, which if you'd asked me that 5 years ago would have been insane for me to be sitting here and saying, but I wouldn't want you to waste your time, George. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I think we have agreed that we would like to look into this further. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I did say it was aspirational. I didn't say we had any evidence whatsoever. So, you know, if we wanted to take it further, we would have to get a group together. But, you know, I mean, the way we feel at the moment, we just have this feeling, and we're entitled to have our feelings, believe it or not, Mr. Follows. Anybody else? Yes, Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was just wanting to say, obviously, we have got a very good conservation team, and as well as obviously responding to hearings and inquiries and whatever, they do the conservation area appraisals and keep all those up to date, which is really important and is referred to obviously in all planning applications. They look at buildings of local merit to make sure that they're all reviewed and, you know, identified through the development management process as well. They monitor all of our listed buildings as well, and obviously identify specific buildings that need work or are being, you know, if they're not being kept in a reasonable condition, and they have got specific powers in order to force the hand of owners on that. I would like the threshold to be a bit lower, but it's quite high. And so they are doing a lot of other things as well. The Article 4, as Councillor Bowles has referred to, has become much harder. DLUC has made it harder, so, you know, to actually achieve it. And so that is probably something that's going to be far more difficult to prove. And with regard to Regulation 7 directions, you know, that I think Councillor Hess might have referred to, you know, you're looking at somebody individually assessing buildings by sort of a one-by-one process in a very specifically defined area. It can't be a blanket thing. So I think, you know, you have to be careful about, you know, what that will achieve rather than looking at the wider conservation area appraisal. And I think they are referred to very well. And I think our heritage, you know, officers are really committed to making sure that our buildings are protected. And I can't think, you know, I've got an issue in Cranley, which, you know, the heritage officers are helping with, and I can't think of a single problem that they aren't trying to fix. Because as I say, sometimes the threshold is quite high on how bad the building needs to get before, you know, it can be forced into some kind of action. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Can we move on then to the land availability assessment, which some of you may have read as you saw it on the agenda. I have a problem with land availability assessments. I have a problem with how we're going to take land availability assessment forward with the need for neighbourhood plans to also allocate more sites. And the reason I say this is because we've had a recent appeal decision, and the original land availability assessment was that the land was not suitable for development, and that is in Waverley's own documents. When it comes to DM, then all of a sudden this is a highly suitable, sustainable, available, deliverable site. Now, if you've put it in your neighbourhood plan and you've put in your evidence for and your evidence against, it's very disappointing when the land availability assessment is not taken forward, you know, into DM, or at least some acknowledgement of it. So I think, given that we are now looking for a new call for sites, we have presumably an imminent call for sites, knowing that all the neighbourhood plans that allocate sites are going to have to allocate more sites, we're all going to be looking for sites. And we do have to work together on this, or at least I hope we do have to work together on this, because if we don't, we're going to have the situation where a neighbourhood plan thinks it's sorted itself and then gets sites that, you know, are, as far as the neighbourhood plan is concerned, inappropriate. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, and I couldn't agree more. You know, we have to work closely together. We've already committed. The officers said when we obviously had we've had a update with town and parishes, and we reaffirmed that commitment to work with the neighbourhood plans on the call for sites. Obviously, not all neighbourhood plans may want to be involved in that process or have actually allocated sites, but with Farnham, we've already spoken to Farnham, and The team had already spoken to the clerk there as well and reaffirmed our commitment to working alongside them with the call for sites. So I don't know whether Claire's got anything else to add to that.
No, but I mean, I think
You know, that's all we can do.
And I guess just maybe, sorry, yeah, just to add, I mean, maybe that relationship between the LAA and then what happens in development management is partly been brought about by the lack of a 5-year housing land supply, and the fact that you can't then say, well, because it isn't in the LLA, you can't consider it as a suitable site, because through your local plan process, you're identifying your suitable sites and your sifting criteria, and you can discount some. And unfortunately, probably the next local plan, you revisit those and see whether they come back in, and that's a plan making process. So I can see that sort of maybe, you know, it's sort of, well, if it isn't in the LLA, then it's not suitable for development, but you know, in the world we're living in with planning, whether you're in that cycle and then you're...
Yeah, but when you've got a 2-year-old neighbourhood plan, so the 3-year kicks in, it doesn't apply. And I think that was really the frustration. I mean, now everything's, you know, we haven't got 5-year housing land supply, 3.89, it's going down. It's really quite frightening because nothing carries full weight, as we know, in the planning process. I'm sorry, nothing carries full weight in the planning process. Please don't correct me on that.
I wasn't going to correct you on that at all.
Good.
Don't preempt what I was going to say, please. I was going to say, just as Claire mentioned about, and you mentioned about the housing numbers, we have for the last 2 years had, I think, the highest housing numbers we've ever delivered in Waverley, but obviously we're still dealing with the backlog. So whilst we've had high numbers, we're still dealing with that backlog. So we're still under delivering. So, you know, it is very difficult to catch up once you've had quite a few years of under delivery.
You know, I'm not denying it's difficult. I'm just saying, just the facts. The facts are we haven't got a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore we haven't got any documents that carry full weight in the planning process. And we need to fight for every single site that we don't think is appropriate, and equally for every site that we do think is appropriate. And, you know, I mean, I fully understand that, but it's at times when that hasn't happened, when, you know, before we went to the stage where neighbourhood plans become out of date and then they're at total risk, you know, and that's my point. If you define a site, yes, of course things change, but if you define a site and say it's not suitable for residential development, and then, you know, not very many years down the line, it suddenly becomes the perfect site when there is not a shortage of sites in the area, it's very disappointing. And that's why, as I say, when we say work together, I mean, we do mean work together. And in fairness, some of the neighbourhood planning officers we've had before, because we have had designated neighbourhood planning officers before, so you will remember some of them, Councillor Gale, and some of them, you know, weren't necessarily helpful all the way, but on site selection, I have to say they were superb with the Farnham neighbourhood plan, and I know they worked with you over in
because we had no sites to allocate, there's nowhere for anything to go.
So, you know, it's got to be worked together, and it's got to be, well, you know, I've always said that, you know, it gives me no pleasure to say that, you know, that nothing carries any weight. I want the 5-year house land supply. I want the documents up to date. I mean, it doesn't do any of us any good if they're not. So I think from what we've got, what I'm seeing here, from these 3 items, which were meant to be discussed at the pre-meet, but weren't for whatever reason. Really and truly, it's just the conservation area that we'd like to take forward, perhaps George and I, and see, you know, we'll get some of this evidence that's needed and see whether or not other areas are. It's not damage, you know, it's corporate paint that drives us mad. You know, it's seeing Oliver Bonas, as I call him so nicely, all pink. You know, I'm sorry, I do love pink, but I mean, you know, when you see waterfall pink,
it was the Bonas I'm looking.
you know, it's that sort of
horrible.
It is horrible. And you go into other conservation areas, and for some unknown reason, Oliver Bonas is not all pink. And I just wonder why. You know, that's all I'm asking. So I will find the evidence and I will bring it to Claire and see. But Councillor Hyman's right. I mean, in the sense that, you know, the resourcing of all of this is something we've got to sort out, and thank goodness it's not this committee that does that, but as a council we have to do it. Because obviously it's the resourcing the people within the department that are going to make it great again, isn't it? Does anybody else wish to make a final comment before we head off? Yes, Jake.
In the interest of all that, does anyone want to recommend a specific recommendation as to anything we discussed? Would you like to carry, or?
I mean, do we do a task and finish group, or do we just rely on the people that are interested to get together?
That's down to the committee.
That is your decision to make.
Madam Chairman,
Yeah.
I think your suggestion is fine, that you work with councillor Hess, and if somebody else wants to come in, otherwise it makes it a bit unwieldy.
Yeah. We'll get the biggest car, we'll drive round and have a look and see whether or not we're worrying unnecessarily, whether Oliver Bonus is picking up all that other country.
We've got Screwfix.
Haven't made it that big, have
That's
we?
in our conservation area. Are we on YouTube? Please tell me we're not on YouTube.
Oh, we probably are, right.
No, we are
I-
still.
Yes.
Well, just to clarify, it's the will of the committee that you take forward that work outside of the committee.
Outside of the committee.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.